Does Pete Alonso really want to play for the Cubs? We'll talk about it on today's edition, Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 of bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The Pete Alonso trade news never seems to stop. The Chicago Cubs are reportedly interested in trading for Pete Alonso. A couple of different Cubs reporters have decided to create a story, which I don't know if it even exists, but let's get into the reporting. This is from Bruce Levine, who said this on an appearance on Hit and Run with Matt Spiegel, I guess in Chicago. Quote, the mumbling out there is the Cubs are going to do everything they can to trade for Pete Alonso from the New York Mets. Then Jesse Rogers of ESPN, another Cubs and White Sox reporter, confirmed this report and went as far as to say that Alonso wants to come to the Cubs, saying, quote, he has surveyed the big market contending teams and saw the Cubs don't have any first baseman. Rogers told the Cap and J Hood show. They have a pretty good team in a great market, so I think he wants to come here as much as they want him. Well, first things first, does Pete Alonso want to be a Chicago Cub? Maybe when he hits free agency and these are the teams in front of him, I can see that. But is Pete Alonso telling anybody right now that he wants to be a Cub after the season they just went through? A guy that will send out any congratulations he can to, not congratulations, but any piece of admiration he can to the fans in New York and how much he loves being in New York. And anytime a microphone has ever been put in front of his face, he says he wants to be a Met. Every bit of actions we have ever seen from Alonso has shown a willingness to stay. But yeah, he's telling people behind the scenes, oh, Chicago's where I want to go. Now, what I'm going to do now is at least entertain the landing spot of Pete Alonso to the Cubs, because I don't think that the notion itself is outlandish. I think the Jesse Rogers report about he wants to come to the Cubs, that to me seems a little far-fetched, especially as then they're talking about how he'd be amenable to accepting a team-friendly deal with the Cubs. If he's going to accept the team-friendly deal, why would that not be with the Mets? And I know that the Mets refuted the reporting, but there was some reporting out there about the Mets and Alonso and how years were the discrepancy on whether or not they could sign Alonso. That he might have wanted a 10-year commitment, and the Mets were not willing to go there. Again, that's a report that Billy Apple refuted. Now it's a brand new baseball ops lead in David Stearns, who's running the show as the president. So all of those previous talks at this point don't even matter because they now started new. But the point is, the idea that he's going to take a hometown discount to play with the Cubs, let me look around the league, because if there was a place where Pete Alonso would take a hometown discount, you think it might be his hometown? Would I be shocked at all if in free agency, if Alonso gets there, he gets a nice deal and decides to sign to play with the Tampa Bay Rays? Pete Alonso still lives in Tampa, still spends his off seasons there. His family's in Tampa. He's a family man. Would I see him going to Tampa, a team that's also really good? He's going to be opening a new ballpark at some point over the life of when he would sign a contract that might want a star like Alonso. Like, I see that as more of a fringe possibility just because of his connection there and the fact that the Rays did seem to finish second on Freddie Freeman. I don't know if they view those two guys as similar players. Freddie Freeman's more the contact and sort of the clear-cut, obvious guy as far as being such an undeniably great bat that an analytically driven franchise like the Rays looks at him and says that's value no matter what. But Alonso is undeniable run production too. And again, there's that connection. So, if there was someone saying that Alonso wants to come home, I'd believe that a little more than he wants to come to Chicago. Look at the other teams out there, though. Let's just follow the notion that he wants a big market contending team. Well, that just scratches off the AL Central. Pretty much scratches off the AL West. Do we now consider Houston a big market team because they've won so much? I don't know. Do you consider the Rangers a big market team? They spend like one, but they have a first baseman. And Houston, I just don't see it. So then you go to the AL East. You got Vladdy in Toronto, not happening. Yankees, we're not even going to entertain that one. The Red Sox have Tristan Casas, and the Orioles aren't going to spend. So, all right, outside of Tampa, you can kind of rule out the AL East. The NL East, Braves have Matt Olson. Phillies, Bryce Harper might remain a first baseman. Marlins and Nats, no chance. You go out west, the Dodgers have Freeman. You can't really call the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, the Padres, even the Giants really big market teams, although I would say the Giants in free agency could be a team that would spend on a player of Alonso's caliber. So maybe they're in the fringes. And then, you go to the Central and the Brewers have some interest in him, but are they going to actually give him the contract? I sort of doubt it. The Reds, the Pirates, don't see either of those teams as small markets. The Cardinals, their move would be to trade for him early and then get him locked up on a team-friendly deal. Again, if he's going to sign a team-friendly deal, probably with the Mets, and they have Paul Goldschmidt for next season anyway. So yes, if we go across the league, maybe the Chicago Cubs are the one team that would trade for Alonso. Maybe they're the one team that would trade for him and give him the long-term extension. That would be, a good fit for him that he would probably agree to if the money was right. But I do completely reject the notion that Pete Alonso wants to play for the Cubs and that he's pushing himself in that direction in any shape or form. But the Cubs are this interested and they're letting some stuff leak to reporters that they're going to make a push for him. What would that push look like? How much are they all in on this 83-win team they just put together? That they want to trade for Pete Alonso right now, something they have not shown any real desire to do lately as far as trading from their farm system. How much would they be willing to part with to acquire a talent like Alonso? That's what we'll discuss next. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The New York Jets are playing the Denver Broncos this weekend. Both teams are 1-3. It's in Denver, so the Jets are an underdog. 2.5-point dogs right now if you look at FanDuel. You think they can get closer to that? You think they can just win outright and bet on the money line? Honestly, as much as the Jets have struggled this season, I don't think the Broncos are that good. So maybe this is the week. And again, you can just make that your first bet. All you got to do is place a $5 wager, and you're going to unlock $200 in bonus bets, win or lose at FanDuel. There's a wide range of betting options that include the spread, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, so let's take a trip down the hypothetical highway and say this offseason, Pete Alonso and his representation go into David Stern's office, and it's time to try to hammer out a contract extension. And those talks go horribly. Alonso demands 11 years. David Stern counters with 5. The sides are so far apart, and it becomes clear it's untenable. And instead of going into the season with Pete Alonso, they decide to trade him. Well, what would the Mets require from the Cubs to get a deal done? To me, any conversation has to start with a top pitching prospect. And when you look at the Cubs system, there's one arm that you see in the top 10 that is intriguing enough to trade a player of Alonso's caliber, considering the fact that it seems that the Mets are still going to try to win next year, and they can just keep Pete. And they could even let this drag out to free agency because I still believe, and we'll get to what the this season maybe did to him as far as the mental toll of it and how he's feeling about the franchise. I think that's an interesting conversation that we'll have in the final segment. But I still think that his his desire is going to be to come back to the Mets. So I believe they have that in their back pocket to know that, hey, they can let his last season play out, let him play out his contract year, and maybe reap the rewards of that. And when he hits free agency, keep an open dialogue with him and get a deal done. So knowing that, if you're in the position where you're listening even to calls on Pete Alonso, you need to get something back that you are sure is going to impact your team in a significant fashion over the next 6 to 7 years. You have to. And this is a team that is now loaded up the middle when it comes to their prospects. They have Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, and Drew Gilbert all up the middle when it comes to that type of a player. Not to mention, you look at the lower levels, yeah, Colin Houck and Marco Vargas, shortstop prospects as well. So they really don't need that type of a prospect. They really don't need position players at this point when it comes to their prospect depth. So it's got to be a pitcher. The one pitching prospect that I would open the door to trading Pete Alonso for is Cade Horton. So he is the number 2 overall prospect in the Cubs system. And if a Cubs fan is tuning in to watch this episode or listen to this episode, they are immediately saying we're not doing that. And that's why I don't think that this is a viable situation. But again, you got to give to get. And if you're the Mets, that's what you're asking for. Now, if you're not aware of who Cade Horton is, and I wasn't until, an hour ago, he played quarterback at Oklahoma. He, pitched as well in his final season, had Tommy John actually at the beginning of his college career, but actually legitimately was a 2-sport star at Oklahoma. Gets drafted by the Cubs 7th overall because he has that much arm talent. Made his professional debut this year, went from low A to double A. Overall, made 21 starts, pitched to a 3.26 ERA, had 117 strikeouts and 88 in the third innings pitched. You look at what he did and you put him in a similar ballpark to a Blade Tidwell, and he might be better than Blade Tidwell. He just turned 22 years old in August. So he could be the best pitching prospect in the Mets system if you were to make that type of a trade. That's where the conversation starts. Here's the aspect of it that I don't quite get. The Cubs might have a first baseman. In that radio hit, let's go back to it. Who was it again? Was it Bruce Levine or Jesse Rogers? Okay, it was Jesse Rogers. Said he as in Alonso has surveyed the big market contending teams and saw the Cubs don't have any first baseman. They do have Matt Mervis. Now, that's not to say that Matt Mervis is definitely the answer, because this season he got his shot, and in 27 games he put up a 531 OPS and only hit 3 home runs, and then spent the rest of the year in AAA. But in AAA, he hit 282, had a 399 on base, 533 slug, and had 22 home runs. And the year prior, he really made a name for himself. Now, he's not considered a top 100 prospect because he's a guy that went undrafted and ended up, just sort of establishing himself with a monster 2022 season. But there was a moment in time where Cubs fans were saying Matt Mervis is the first baseman of the future, where they were upset about the signing of Eric Hosmer and having Trey Mancini on the roster because they were blocking Matt Mervis. The reason why they felt that way is because in 2022, again, it was, it's not again. Cade Horton had 3 stops this year. 2022, it was 3 stops in the minor leagues for Mervis. Went from high A to triple A. Hit 309, 379 on base, 606 slug, had 36 home runs, 119 RBIs. He is 25 years old. So if I'm David Stearns and I can get Cade Horton and Matt Mervis for Pete Alonso, yeah, I'd probably consider that. Because Matt Mervis then would just maybe get the red carpet rolled out for him and say, hey, you start at first base this year and you see what you have. And he doesn't break through. There's a lot of other guys that could shift over. There's maybe making an open competition between Mark Vientos and Matt Mervis. But I still don't think the Mets necessarily want to go that route. And I don't think the Cubs would either. Why are the Cubs so all in on this 83-win team that they're going to part with some of their best prospects when they could just get a stopgap, do exactly what they did this year, They maybe necessarily need to get a stopgap, honestly, because they still have Patrick Wisdom, if I'm not mistaken, who can play third base. You can play Morel at third, or can play first base, Morel at third. Like they have ways that they can just get around this and give Matt Mervis a chance again next year. And then, hey, if Pete Alonso's a free agent, that's when you go all in and try to sign him outright. I don't know why they'd trade for him. I don't think that they're a Pete Alonso away from winning the World Series, unless they're just so dead set on getting him and extending him. So I honestly look at this reporting and these stories that came out about it, and I don't think there's really much merit to it. I do think that all of these stories and all of these rumors, the questions that were asked of Alonso at the end of the season, I do wonder what kind of a toll that's had on him. And does that push him away from the Mets, or does it push him to the Mets? And that's what we want to get to in the final segment. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good with their stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. And Bird Dog shorts fit way better than regular shorts that are made of that stiff, restricting cotton. No, they fixed that issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement or comfort. I love to wear my Bird Dogs out on the golf course, especially because they use an anti-stick sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So can wear them out when I play my 18 holes and come on home. And I don't have to take them off because I feel disgusting or because I want to get comfortable, because they are comfortable. Keep them on, go out to dinner later that night. I mean, maybe if you're playing golf in South Florida like myself, you might have to take a shower, but guess what? You can actually take those Bird Dogs off, set them off to the side, put them right back on if you're, okay with that sort of thing. Hey, it's anti-stink sweat wicking fabric. It's not going to smell bad. If you want to try the Bird Dogs for yourself, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB and enter promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with every order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB or promo code LockedOnMLB for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. They promise you that. So Pete Alonso just went through the most frustrating season of his career. And there's been a lot of frustrating seasons. Let's sort of go through the arc. You can actually begin in 2018. Pete Alonso was absolutely ready to hit at the major league level in 2018. He did not get his opportunity. Didn't get a shot at it and was upset with the franchise because of it. They bring in Bertie Van Wagenen as the new GM, and he makes the decision to play Pete Alonso on opening day. Everybody loves it. Guess what's funny about that in retrospect? If Bertie Van Wagenen didn't do that, guess who would have 2 years left of team control and would be a lot easier to extend this offseason? Pete Alonso. Now, he wouldn't have a rookie home run record, but it's just sort of funny how all these things end up working out and how stories sort of change over time. 2019 was overall a successful, exciting season. 2020 is the COVID year. I don't think anyone was having fun that year. 2021 season starts great. Mets in first place. Then a massive collapse. Not a lot of fun for Pete Alonso and the New York Mets, and he struggled throughout that season. Last year puts up maybe a career year, or at least a year on par with his 2019 season. Great overall run for the Mets. They win 101 games. They make the playoffs. Alonso gets the chance to taste October baseball for the first time. Shouldn't have had any gripes about how things went. This year, disaster. He struggled, particularly in June, where the team was a disaster without him performing at his best. And he had to watch teammates that he really had grown great bonds with, like Max Scherzer, Mark Hanna, see these guys dealt at the deadline. To hear that he was on the block at the trade deadline, or at least the Mets weren't hanging up the phone, and had to contemplate a life beyond the Mets for the first time, had to play on a team that had no hope in the second half. And overall, just seemed to be completely frustrated and exhausted by the time the season ended. Now, that didn't stop him from going out in his Mets uniform with his wife and taking pictures on the field. And I still think he probably wants to be with the New York Mets. But what has this season done to him? How has it changed him? And also, you have the fact that they fired a manager that he seemingly loved, because there was a report that came out that when the news got to Alonso that Buck was getting fired, he wanted to go up and address it with Steve Cohen himself. It doesn't seem like Pete Alonso has this great relationship with Steve Cohen. The guys that seem to have a good relationship with him are Brandon Nimmo and Francisco Lindor. I wonder why. They have their money. They're locked up. They're part of this thing. Now, does this push Pete Alonso out the door? Or does this make Alonso and his representation a lot more willing to negotiate this offseason? I really think there's a chance it's the latter, where these sides can figure something out. They have to get creative with this contract because the leverage, I really don't know who it belongs to. In some respects, it belongs to the Mets because we're talking about a commitment that's going to span potentially over $200 million. Having to be willing to give that, gives them the leverage in a sense. And the fact that they still have a year of team control here, they don't have to get a deal done now. And they have proven that guys can hit free agency and they can bring them back. It's not a Zach Wheeler situation, which I had to bring up at least one point on the show today. He was just unbelievable in a playoff start tonight. The first hill I was ever willing to die on with Locked On Mets, that they should trade Noah Syndergaard and extend Zach Wheeler in the 2019 season. My first hosting this show, brought up the topic many a time, was absolutely 100% right, as history has shown, as Syndergaard eventually would get hurt and not give the Mets anything more than comp pick value in return. And, Zach Wheeler has gone on to be maybe the best pitcher in the National League with the Phillies over the last 5 years. So, yeah. Has it been 5 years yet? Maybe not. It was a 5-year deal. 4 years? I think it's actually entered the 5th year of that contract. It was what? 2020, 2021, 2022. Yeah. So now he's got 2 years left. Yeah. So 2023 now, geez. Again, all right. You can laugh at me and let me know in the comment section. This guy literally can't count to 4. Let's do it again for the people at home. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. He is entering his final year of that contract. I was right about that originally. I knew he was going to be a free agent. Bring him home. Anyway, back to Alonso. This is a different Mets franchise that can let one of their hometown players, homegrown players, make it to the open market and they can bring them on back. And that might be the best direction for the Mets to go on multiple fronts. One, I don't know how much the market's going to get away from you on Pete Alonso. If you keep an open dialogue and you say, listen, go out, talk to teams, we're committed. We want you back. Bring your offers to us and we're going to make something work. There is that world where something happens. There's also, an opportunity to sign him right now. But again, I think that is certainly in the cards. Also, having Pete Alonso at the play for a contract in 2024 might not be the worst thing. Did you see the year the Yankees got out of Aaron Judge on a contract year? Now, they had to pay him on the other side of it. But, hey, I don't know. I'd take 60 bombs from Alonso next season playing for that contract. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I do think there is a chance that with everything that has happened, the rumors and all that, Alonso might be more open to a contract extension than he has been in the past. And one of the things I mentioned before is that Pete Alonso is the client for his sports agency. He's the guy. He's the guy that they are going to get their biggest check with ever when they take their cut of his big time contract. And because of that, there is probably more of a push from his representation to get him to free agency. But at the end of the day, the agent works for you. You don't work for the agent. Pete Alonso says, I want to stay with the Mets. I don't want this hanging over my head for another year. I'm sick of this. Let's get a deal done. I think there is absolutely a chance that it happens this offseason. I think there's a better chance that he's extended than there is that he's traded. If I had to sort of weigh it all out, I would say probably 60% chance he is just kept and he plays out his final year before he hits free agency without getting that contract. I would say 39% chance that he ends up working on an extension with the Mets, and a 1% chance that he's traded this winter. That's honestly what I believe. Now, if you open up the trade deadline move, I think that's a little more likely, but only if the Mets were completely out of it. So that's where we'll leave this conversation for now. On tomorrow's show, we have one of two topics we're going to discuss. These are going to be the final two shows of the week. One of them will be who will be the next manager of the New York Mets. And we're going to wait and see what happens in that series between the Brewers and the Diamondbacks, where the Diamondbacks took game one of that wild card series. Before we have that conversation, for some reason, you can try to follow my line of thinking there. If the Brewers extended to a game three, we're going to talk about Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani, as I've been promising for, I guess, a week now. We're going to have that show. If the Brewers are eliminated, we'll go with the manager topic, and those will be our final two shows of the week. Also, I have failed to mention up to this point, join our subtext. Okay, this is a really fun way you can interact with me, interact with the show. It's a 2-week free trial. You get text updates from me about the show, about some of my thoughts on the Mets that I'm not even sharing anywhere else. And you can ask me any questions you want. So check that out. It is in the episode description. As always, thank you all for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter, Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, Locked On Mets.